Ask a lot of our guests right before the free agency period and offseason start in the NFL. Give us the most interesting team to keep an eye on. We have an answer to that question. Unsportsmanlike is brought to you by Robinhood. Get a 3% IRA match, only $5 a month. The Pittsburgh Steelers have become the most interesting offseason team. I don't think any of us could have predicted that or would have predicted that, but I would argue that since the offseason started, we have spent more time on our show talking about this storied, legendary, iconic franchise, the model franchise for so many teams in all sports, at all levels, in all countries. And I don't want to say ineptitude, because that's not there yet. Let me read the quote, and then maybe you can give a determining factor as to what this is. So the NFL owners' meetings are going on as we speak at the Breakers in Palm Beach, Florida. And the coaches are there, all the general manager types are there, all of the executives and owners, et cetera, are there. And Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Steelers, spoke with Brooke Pryor, our Steelers reporter. And Brooke tweeted the following: Mike Tomlin has no definitive update or timeline on Aaron Rodgers. He says they're still evaluating potential acquisitions at the position and doing their due diligence. He says they had a really good day with Rodgers on his visit to Pittsburgh, got to know him better. Mike Tomlin said there was no internal Steelers deadline on a Rodgers decision, to my knowledge. That's the quote from Tomlin. Line of demarcation for an incomplete QB position to hinder team development and training camp. Tomlin said the spring is about teaching and growing. Mike Tomlin said he didn't ask Aaron Rodgers about his timeline to make a decision. Quote, I really wanted to spend more of our time just getting to know him better and things that he values as a player and as a man and what he might be looking for with his next stop, end quote. Your reaction to these comments from Tomlin?
Well, the way that I interpret that is that they don't have the sense of urgency that we feel externally, right? In the middle of the Pittsburgh Steelers Aaron Rodgers saga, the way we're viewing it from the outside is, why aren't you having the sense of urgency? Why aren't you giving him a timeline? If he doesn't choose you, doesn't that inform how you move forward at the most important position in the sport? Whereas for Mike Tomlin to say that he doesn't think that there's a deadline, to his knowledge, an internal deadline on Aaron Rodgers making his decision, the only way that I can interpret that is that they're very confident that he's going to say yes and that he's going to come there. That the meeting must have gone well. Maybe they know something we don't, or have more confidence in the end result than we do on the outside. Because if not, why would that be his reaction to all of this?
But there's always the possibility that Aaron Rodgers changes his mind, right? And the fact that he hasn't made a more definitive decision at this point in the schedule or this point in the calendar should give anyone in that building cause for pause. You've got to be uneasy, to say the least bit, that your quarterback depth chart consists of Mason Rudolph.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's where you at. I mean, listen, for as much respect as I have for Mike Tomlin, he is culpable in the atrocity that is the Steelers quarterback room. And this has been a problem that's been brewing for a real long time. Over the last half decade, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're 24th in QBR, 24th in points scored, and they're 22nd in passing touchdowns. At some point, something about that has to change if you're going to get serious about competing and winning championships in today's NFL. And it feels like the Steelers are holding on to this antiquated idea of what a football team should be, this old school identity. And quite frankly, based on the rules and based on the athletes, you're not going to have a lot of success. And we've got proof of concept of that because it's been 3 presidential inaugurations since they won a playoff game. And once you get into the tournament, that's when you're playing against the best competitions. Eventually, if you want to hold up a Lombardi trophy again, you're going to have to beat some good teams. And it's going to be hard to beat good teams without good quarterback play. And the Steelers are perpetually in this mode of searching and seeking for a quarterback. I guess it's ironic that they're going after a quarterback that searches and seeks himself in Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, I am disappointed that the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, which typically is class personified, would allow the franchise to devolve to this point where they're depending on Aaron Rodgers to be the savior of the 2025 season.
You brought up a bunch of fascinating points. I want to go back to one you said.
They could think Aaron Rodgers is joining them right now.
Feel very confident about it. Yep.
And he's more than allowed to change his mind.
And more than capable of it. He is somebody that's going to do things on his own timeline and do whatever he thinks is best for him.
And then what happens? They must maybe know that whoever they would draft at 21, if it's going to be a quarterback, is so far above where the masses would draft them that they feel confident that we're going to get our guy. Let's just pretend it's Shannon Monroe for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
How do they know whoever's before them won't feel the exact same way?
Well, there's that uncertainty.
There could be another reach.
There's that uncertainty as well. But the part that you just alluded to, which is overdrafting a guy, didn't they just try that with Kenny Pickett? They quite literally just tried that, and it didn't work. And this is a guy that they had all the data points on because he played college ball at Pitt.
And they share a building, basically.
And they share a building. Mm-hmm. So they had all the data points on him, reached on him because it was a position of need, and they had no answer post Ben Roethlisberger. And look what that happened with that. 3 years later, the dude is on 2 different teams. So I don't understand why they would think that would be a viable path in order to find their next quarterback. I don't understand how Aaron Rodgers and reaching on a quarterback at 21 makes more sense than the Pittsburgh Steelers being aggressive, mortgaging future draft capital in order to get up in the draft board and get a more talented prospect. I don't understand how those things don't make sense.
I'm with you 100%, but that's why I keep coming back to the notion that they must feel more confident about this than we can read into. Because if not, the plan that you just laid out, or the lack thereof, is a disastrous option. So they must say publicly, we don't have this deadline. We wanted to get to know him better. It was a good visit. Internally, maybe there's something that we'll find out about later where they feel like he's going to come, he's doing it on XYZ timeline, and we're going to work it out. Because if not, then this is one of the all-time fumbles. All time. Where you had different options in the offseason that you could have pursued, and you didn't, waiting for this plan to bear out, and then it doesn't. It will be really bad if it doesn't happen. So it leads me to believe that there's something we don't know.
I don't care how many assurances that you have from a player. The deal is not done until he's actually signed. And he's not signed.
Yeah.
They haven't agreed in principle, nothing. So there is always the looming possibility, as remote as it may seem in their minds, that Aaron Rodgers decides he's not going to play for them. He could play for somebody else. He could retire. All of those things are potentially on the board, and I don't understand why the Pittsburgh Steelers would be literally holding on to the whims of Aaron Rodgers that's going into his age 42 season. That's not a way to run a multi-billion-dollar organization.
It's not.